So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, from whatever part of the world you're currently listening to our podcast. I am in Bali, Crete, Greece, and I've been here for a few days. So I thought do my podcast while I'm over here and, kind of reflect on the overall financial situation. With Ukraine and how U.S. taxpayers are basically on the hook regarding reconstruction and development in Ukraine. So I'm going to be titling or calling this podcast "We the American Taxpayers." So anyway, this is a simplified version of things that you all should consider as American taxpayers, regardless if you're a citizen or an immigrant. I think it's worth knowing how your tax dollars are being spent outside of the United States. My background is in financial analysis. Now it's in the federal government. I also work as a consultant for the IMF and the World Bank. I'm currently focusing on economic development in frontier and emerging markets of Europe. Also, the author of books in the New World Marketplace, Accelerations of Economies, and overall New World Market Concepts in the Globalization of Markets. And I've also traveled and spoken at various international events, and I'm contributing to the New World Market evolution. So just a little bit of history regarding Ukraine and Russia, because I think it's important to really understand and focus in on the connection between the two countries. They share a common heritage that goes back more than 1,000 years in time, when Kiev, now Ukraine's capital, was at the center of the first Slavic state, Kievan Rus, the birthplace of both Ukraine and Russia. In AD 988, again, AD 988, Volodymyr the Great, the pagan prince of Novgorod and Grand Prince of Kiev, accepted the Orthodox Christian faith and was baptized in the Crimean city of Chersonesus. Okay? But you all know Vladimir Putin, the president, still holds on to the notion and his overall mindset within the value system that he operates in, that the Ukrainian and Russian people are one, a single whole community. So this was basically researched and analyzed and measured, tested by the National Geographic, based on various historical connections and whatever, if any, divides them. So why is it relevant? Based on mutual agreements. These are government pacts that have been enacted and put in place to secure Ukrainian-Russian relationship and various peace agreements between the two countries. So think about it as the U.S. and Britain. The U.S. and Britain shares the same culture, predominantly language-wise, political-wise, culture, tradition, religion in some aspects. So there's some strong connection, and it's think of the U.S. as a branch of the United Kingdom. When the U.S. and its states were Commonwealth states. Okay, before there was a United States of America, there was a Commonwealth, which the British basically colonized, states within the East Coast. So similar, situation, basically reflects on Russia and Ukraine. But in 1994, December 5th, 1994, they basically created a pact which legalized their agreements. One was the Budapest Memorandum that was signed in December 5th, 1994. And again, a Russian-Ukraine Friendship Treaty in May 31st, 1997. And, a couple of years after that, the Minsk Treaty, September 5th, 2014. However, on September 14th, 2020, the new President Zelensky approved Ukraine's new national security strategy, which provides for the development of the distinctive partnership with NATO, with the aim of membership into NATO during the global pandemic. So that tells you that in 2020, things have been put in motion to, basically do away with the agreement between Russia and Ukraine in the Budapest Memorandum, the Russian-Ukraine Friendship Treaty, and the Minsk Treaty in September 5th. So all that's been basically brushed off by the new president in September 14, 2020, while there's an ongoing pandemic. So obviously the pandemic have created mayhem. It created a lot of economic hardship, and it created a lot of discord among neighboring countries and even, donor countries. You name it, it was a perfect storm for many of the emerging and frontier markets of Central and Eastern Europe, as well as other, countries outside of Europe that had been pushed up against the wall in being able to survive and recalibrate their economic position, trade-wise, commercial relationships, all that were recalibrated. So in April 2021, Russian forces were stationed around the border of Ukraine and within the agreed territories in Ukraine, such as Crimea, Donbass, etc. And this was through this organization, right? CSIS.org. It's a think tank that basically did an analysis on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So that source is available on their website, and you can pretty much connect the dots. In 2021, summer of 2021, there was a heads up, or there was a basic warning that was given by Russia to Ukraine regarding ascending into NATO and the European Union, and its aspiration regarding joining the European Union. So that was pretty interesting. I thought, let me make sure that you guys understand. I'm not taking sides. I'm not trying to blame anyone. I'm not trying to make somebody look bad. I'm just here as an analysis professional, as a former federal government financial analyst. So all I'm going to be talking to you guys is, material that I managed to find online regarding facts that have been scrutinized by the organization that published them. So I'm just basically trying to connect the dots, and I'm just trying to give you guys a background knowledge of what took place and what is the likely, ramification of, disagreements and conflicts between Ukraine and Russia. So in 2017, Ukraine's GDP is at 112.09 billion dollars. This is after the 2014 Russian aggression towards Ukraine. So the 112.09 billion dollars was in 2017 after the 2014 aggression. Okay, and then in 2018, Ukraine's GDP was at 130 billion and 89. So it jumped from 112 to 112.09 to 130.89 billion, a jump of 3.49%. Interesting, development, right? I mean, 3.9 isn't much, but it's still something to consider, because if you look at their GDP, Ukraine's GDP in 2019, it was at 154.85. I'm sorry, 88 billion, 154.88 billion, while they were still trading with Russia. This was before the pandemic in 2019. And when the pandemic rolled in, their GDP went down to 150.6 billion, but they didn't have any issues with Russia at that time. There was no conflict, there was no, headbanging going on between the two of them, while there was an ongoing pandemic in 2020. So 150.6 billion in 2020. And just, consider this. In 2017, they were at 112.09 billion without any aggressions from the Russians. And in 2020, they catapulted their economy to 150.6 billion. And there was still no conflict, even though there was a pandemic going on. Okay? No conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But look at this. In 2021, Ukraine's GDP went from 150.6 billion in 2020 to 200.1 billion in 2021. There was still no aggression from Russia, but was warned, the Ukrainians were warned of a possible military conflict in August 2021 if they were to move forward with joining the European Union and NATO. Okay, so they were growing, significantly, pretty fast. I mean, 150.6 billion in 2020, and a year later, they managed to up that to an additional 50 billion. So I think that pretty much gives you an indicator that this conflict between Russia and Ukraine was an unnecessary evil. It's an unnecessary war, but yet no one tried to, mediate or, prevent it from happening. Because if you look at it in 2022, Ukraine's GDP was at 374 billion with a purchasing power parity at the end of the year, while there's an ongoing war. So from 200.1 billion in 2021 to 374 billion between 2021 and 2022, they basically upped their GDP by 174 billion. Okay, so what does that tell you when there's an ongoing war? The war basically increased the purchasing power of Ukraine. Okay, and that's all within, just a year span. And today, in the year 2023, and we're at only the mid of the year, it's at 163.71 mid fiscal year. So in 2023, their GDP was higher than in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. Okay, that just half of a year in 2023. So something, isn't quite, making sense. Why was there a war? Why did they want to join the European Union? Maybe because they wanted additional revenue, which is totally understandable. But, it could have also prevented the war had they just tried to, compromise, and there wouldn't be any other, financial downfall for Ukraine if they were to compromise. Um, and so, if you look at the EU contribution, Ukraine's surrounding neighbors, if the European Council, in their meeting in 2020 and 2021 of October 2022, the Commission has proposed an unprecedented support package for Ukraine of up to 18 billion for the year 2023. So the European Union, not all their member countries were in agreement, but yet they're going to be doling out 18 billion. And it will come in the form of concessional loans dispersed in regular installments as of 2023, this year. So all of these amounts are basically being put into Ukraine. Still, there was no need for conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The European Union could easily donate additional funding for Ukraine without Ukraine even going into war. Okay, so it basically creates a stable, regular, and predictable financial assistance, averaging 1.5 billion per month, with the help will cover a significant part of Ukraine's short-term funding needs for 2023, which the Ukrainian authorities and the International Monetary Fund estimate at 3.3 billion to 4 billion per month. The support put forward by the EU would need to be matched by similar efforts, by other major donor countries in order to cover all Ukraine's funding needs for 2023. The European Union wants to focus on accompanied by reform to further enhance the rule of law, good governance, anti-fraud, and anti-corruption measures in Ukraine. So this was through the European Commission's press release. And I'm gonna include all these sources on our YouTube channel so you can see the PowerPoint presentation. So it tells you that there's some pre-existing conditions in Ukraine before and after, before the war, and the pre-existing conditions has been ongoing. So not very long ago, I sent an email to the ambassador to the United States, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., asking for them to publish a copy of repayment plans or structure to repay the loans that the U.S. taxpayers have lent to Ukraine. And since I didn't get any response, I figured I'd just go ahead and develop this PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if they're ever going to respond to my email. I don't think they even read it, but I'm not sure if they're going to respond at all. So I thought I'd just go ahead and do this podcast. So what precipitated the war? Well, it's not about land grabbing. It's about economic conditions. One, pandemic. The global pandemic exacerbated, the financial situation and overall struggles in Ukraine, and lack of trade and job creation. Not a whole lot of FDI, foreign direct investment, actively entering Russia or Ukraine. Sovereign debt was high and very difficult to manage. The overall country tax system was flawed. Major corruption and high unemployment in Ukraine, unstable government system and corruption, as most people already know, within the European Union and the States. So there's a lot of pre-existing conditions, and very few people have addressed that. Matter of fact, most of the Russians' funds that was sent to Ukraine was also, according to the Russians, were mismanaged. So if the Russians, that was their number one trading partner and number one donor, complain about their mismanagement and corruption in Ukraine, then maybe we ought to kind of consider those, situations. So taxpayer funds sent to Ukraine in 2022. It was not itemized, but the overall amount based on financial and accounting review by watchdog agency USAFacts.org says that so far the U.S. in 1 year, okay, this is just 1 year, has allocated nearly 115 billion in emergency funding to support Ukraine during the wartime. This was published in February 24, 2023 by USA Facts. This is a watchdog that basically, trace U.S. taxpayer monies being spent by the U.S. government. So the United States has appropriated approximately 115 billion in emergency funding to support Ukraine since February 24, 2022. This provides money for Ukraine as an American partners in the region affected by conflict and U.S. national security programs. So basically, we're also funding neighboring countries to help Ukraine. So let's try to drill down to the facts. The U.S. federal government spent 6.48 trillion, okay, trillion, not billion, trillion, last fiscal year, meaning the money spent on Ukraine today would be equivalent to approximately 2% of the U.S. budget. Okay, 2% of the U.S. budget going to a foreign country is something to definitely consider. Okay, because that's a significant amount that is going to be utilized overseas, that there is no guarantee that U.S. taxpayers can recover that amount, or would it benefit the U.S. market or anyone in America? So some aid falls under the Lend-Lease program. Some people, have basically discussed the Lend-Lease program that was signed in May 2022, meaning Ukraine will have to pay back a certain amount to the U.S. after the war, plus interest, but no structure or guarantees have been provided. So, none of the decision makers, politicians in the States, or anyone that signed off on the money that was sent out to Ukraine have debriefed the U.S. population, U.S. taxpayers, both citizens and immigrants that are paying taxes. Okay? Nothing. What is Ukraine's plan on repaying the loan if they are still in debt with various countries, including Russia and international lending institutions? So before the war, they were already in debt. Okay? And not just to Russia, but they're in debt to a lot of countries and financial institutions. And they've still yet to figure out or provide a plan on repaying those countries and those taxpayers. So as a taxpayer, I'm curious to know what is their overall game plan on making that, in making sure that the U.S. recover our taxes. May it be through trade or commerce. I don't know. They haven't provided that solution. So I'll also provide the source to you off of the USA Facts article. Okay. So let's look at the domestic market. But before we do that, let's see how long we're going to be sending this money to Ukraine. So the U.S. is set to provide assistance to Ukraine into the 2030s. So right now it's 2022. We'll be sending money to Ukraine until the year 2032. Estimated emergency funding spent and allocated by each Appropriations Act. So the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2022, another Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act 2023, and additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2022, and the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2023. So in 2022, we gave 7 billion in 2022. This is outside of, the previous amount. These are all within the Appropriation Act. And then in 2023, 38 billion. Next year, it'll be 21 billion. In the following year, 2025, will be 13 billion. In 2026, it'll be 10 billion. 2027, 11 billion. 2028, 8 billion. 2029, 4 billion. 2030, 1 billion. 2031, 315 million. 2032 is 6 million. So that's all taxpayers' money. Meaning we're going to be, having to pay taxes that are already earmarked to go to a foreign country. So it's not going to go into our infrastructure. It's not going to build roads, better services in the country. None of that. It's all going to go to a foreign country. The U.S. has allocated $114.9 billion in aid over the last year, containing 4 separate bills. So $30 billion in military assistance. This is all the itemized, spending towards Ukraine. So in February 2024, 2022, $30 billion in military assistance, and this is not calculated into the $114.9 billion. In 2022, the U.S. appropriated nearly $55 billion in foreign aid towards supporting Ukraine, not calculated into the $114 billion. Okay, so Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act in 2022 and the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2022, which provide 13.6 and 41.6 billion emergency funding. Okay, folks. So this administration signed the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023 last September. Okay, and the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023 last December, providing an additional 12.3 and 47.4 billion in emergency funding, respectively. President Biden signed the Ukrainian Democracy Defense Land Lease Act in May 2022, authorizing the U.S. military to provide Ukraine and other Eastern European countries with equipment, deferred payments for weapons provided, which is paid for under the budget given to Ukraine. So all of that has to be calculated. So let me give you the breakdown. If the military assistance and foreign aid were added, this is the itemized calculation. 30 billion in 2024. 30 billion in February 24, 2022. That is not calculated in the 114.9 billion into military assistance, 30 billion, foreign aid, 55 billion, Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act, 13.6 billion, Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2022, 41.6 billion, Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2023, 12.3 billion, and the Ukraine Supplemental Ukraine Supplemental Appropriation Act of 2023, 47.4 billion, takes you to 199.9 billion of U.S. tax dollars. Okay, so that's going to be within the 9 years. The money from the bills can take years to distribute, obviously, according to Congressional Budget Office reports, and the U.S. expect to provide emergency funding for Ukraine and neighboring countries until 2032. No real plans to repay or enter into repayment while American taxpayers are going through adverse economic hardship. Here is what Americans are having to deal with. Americans experiencing homelessness. Okay, in 2020 alone, there are 580,466 homeless Americans. 22, there's 582. 500,082, 462 homeless Americans in 2022. And I'm going to be providing all this on our YouTube channel, faceconomicsTV, so y'all can see the PowerPoint presentation eventually. And so the poverty rate in the U.S., there are 3.4 million more children in poverty in 2022 than December 2021, according to research done by Columbia University. Okay, so 3.4 million children in poverty in America since February 2022. All right, and this is just unbelievable. I'm looking at the statistics here, and we've got people that are in poverty in America. Okay, so let's see. You know what? I'm just gonna share this on our YouTube channel so y'all can see the ratios and everything. So according to the World Economic Forum, now ranks the U.S. 13th when it comes to the overall quality of infrastructure. We're number 13 in the world when it comes to infrastructure, meaning that our roads and public, infrastructure are all basically aging and they're becoming very fragile. Says more than 45,000 U.S. bridges and 1 in 5 miles of roads are in poor conditions per American Society of Civil Engineers. I'm reading it from the source. So, guess what, folks? Our country is deteriorating while we're appropriating we're appropriating U.S. tax dollars to countries that is not connected directly to the U.S. It has nothing to do with America or with our overall national security. So why are we sending so much money in a course of 9 years to a foreign country? People losing their homes in the U.S. Okay, the average foreclosure rate in the U.S. was 0.23% in 2022. The highest foreclosure rate in the last 20 years was in 2010 at 2.23%. New Jersey is the state with the highest foreclosure rate, with one foreclosure for every 2,271 homes. Cleveland metro area has the highest foreclosure rate of 0.40%, more than 316% above the national average. Detroit saw the highest increase of 807% in foreclosure filings compared to the previous year. Source, finmasters.com foreclosure rate, and this is all public information. The educated population in America has a mortgage but no home. There's a lot of educated people in America are homeless. They've got nowhere to go because they can't afford making payments, on their student loans and living off of the money that they make, the little money that they make. So student loans today is modern day slavery that U.S. lawmakers are definitely not paying attention enough. They've had all this headbanging going on and fighting over forgiving student loans, but what they don't realize is that if taxpayers aren't able to produce, if they're not able to contribute to the treasury, then there won't be any money that'll be going to a foreign country. Okay, so think about the Americans that have to work so that we can send money to countries that has nothing to do with us directly. Anyway, millions of Americans have student loan debt amassing to more than 1.6 trillion by the end of last year, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It is the result of decades-long explosion in borrowing coupled with soaring education costs. We're the only wealthy countries on this planet that have, a population of educated people that are in poverty, that are going through extreme economic hardship. That's just unheard of. So this is through CNN Politics U.S. loan debt timeline that they did analysis on. So anyway, I'll add all this onto our YouTube channel so you can read it and you can post the video. So this is basically what I've managed to come across. An age group of student loan borrowers. All right, let's do this. 24 or younger, 24 years old and younger, amount owed is at 110 billion. Number of borrowers, 7.6 million. 25 to 34%, 500 billion. And number of borrowers, 14.9 million. So the amount that those borrowers owe is 500 billion. 35 to 49% is at 622 billion, and the number of borrowers is at 14.4 million. And then the next age group is 50 to 61, and amount owed is 282 billion, and number of borrowers is 6.4 million. Another age group is 62 and older, and amount owed is 98 billion, and number of borrowers is 2.4 million. So, uh, look, I'm all about helping other people. I'm a former U.S. Peace Corps volunteer. I try to help, foreign countries that are our allies and other countries that definitely need help from us. But if we can't help ourselves, how can we possibly help others? We need our educated population to get, the assistance that they need. This is a generational problem in America. With that said, let me also give you the stats on, the amount of debt and the number of borrowers that are in school, which is at 118 billion. Number of borrowers is at 6.4 million. Grace period loans that are in grace period is at 41 billion, and number of borrowers is at 1.6 million. The repayment is 16 billion. These are loans that are currently in repayment. It's at 16 billion, and number of borrowers is 0.5 million. The loans that are in deferment is 113 billion, and number of borrowers is at currently 3.1 million. Forbearance 968 billion, and number of borrowers is at 24 million. The defaulted loans is currently at 112 billion, and number of borrowers is 5.1 million. So, if we're giving 199 billion as of today to a foreign country, and we can't even help the educated population in our country that definitely needs that. Student loan wiped out, that needs to be forgiven. We're the only country in the planet that put shackles on our own population. These are generational debt that we're talking about, folks. So when American taxpayers who have been requesting assistance from Congress, Senate, and White House is being ignored and are expected to pay taxes that they can simply send overseas to countries that is not directly tied to the U.S., that's a problem. And the same taxpayers should make sure that their representative is, checked and, held accountable for monies that they appropriate to go abroad to countries that is not directly connected to America. Like I said before, I'm all about helping people, but we got to help our population first because they're the ones that's having to pay taxes. With that said, folks, thanks for joining my podcast. Please share, or, comment, provide any form of correction if there's any that you thought that I should correct. This podcast is going to be on Spotify, and we're also going to upload it on our Buzzsprout platform, as well as our faceconomicsTV YouTube channel, so people can, reflect on some of the points that I've mentioned. I'm also going to be uploading our PowerPoint presentation for anyone to review and pause the video, so y'all can, kind of read through all the stats that I managed to come across while doing this report. Thanks for watching. Glad to be with you from Bali, Greece. Bali, Crete, here in Greece. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.